I was 16 when I stepped off that bus with a crumpled napkin in my pocket that said Hargrove Estate, Greenbridge. I didn't know what an estate was. I thought I was coming to clean a house, maybe watch some kids. Instead, I stepped into a life that would chew through the better years of my youth and only spit me out when I finally decided to stop swallowing what they fed me: fear, guilt, and silence. They didn't greet me at the door. The driver honked twice and drove off. I knocked, waited, and knocked again until a maid I'd never see again opened the door and motioned for me to follow. No words, just a tired look. She led me past marble floors and walls lined with portraits of people who looked like they'd never worked a day in their lives. Then down a narrow staircase to a room no bigger than a walk-in closet with a cot, a single bare bulb, and no window. "This is where you sleep," she said, then left. That was 1981. I would live in that room for 27 years. At first, they were polite. Mr. Hargrove shook my hand the way you shake someone's hand when you're doing them a favor. Mrs. Hargrove called me dear until she stopped learning my name altogether. They told me I'd be paid weekly, fed daily, and respected always. That third promise didn't last through the first month. I was hired as a housekeeper, but within a week I was also the nanny, then the cook, then the dog walker, the stain remover, the errand runner, the emotional sponge. When the kids cried, I was expected to rock them to sleep. When the house was messy, I was the reason it wasn't perfect. When dinner wasn't to their liking, I'd hear the fork clatter on the plate and a sigh that felt like a slap. But the hardest part wasn't the hours. It wasn't even the endless lists or the bruises from carrying boxes up 3 flights while the teenage son played video games. It was the erasure, the way I became furniture, the way they'd laugh over wine while I picked crumbs from under their chairs, the way the children stopped looking me in the eye around age 12. My name is Maria Delgado. I cleaned their toilets, raised their children, and absorbed their tantrums like wallpaper absorbed smoke. I was the maid, the nanny, the punching bag. And for a long, long time I believed that was all I was ever meant to be. But I'm not telling this story to stay in the past. I'm telling it because one day, something changed. One day I said, no more. And everything that came after was mine. It smelled like damp wood and old paint. That was my first memory of the room under the stairs. No sunlight ever reached it. Just the thin glow of a yellow bulb that flickered every few hours, like it was reminding me I didn't belong here. The mattress was a slab of foam, sagging in the middle, stained at the corners. The floor creaked when I shifted my weight, and the walls were so thin I could hear the dishwasher upstairs and the dog pacing in the hallway. Mrs. Hargrove called it the maid's quarters, but it wasn't a room. It was a leftover space someone had decided to make just habitable enough to say they'd offered shelter. There was no closet, only a rusted coat hook nailed to the wall. No mirror, just a square of cracked glass leaning against the sink. And the sink? It dripped at night, slow and steady, like a reminder that even silence wasn't mine. Sometimes I would lie awake, counting the drops. That's how I marked time. I didn't decorate. There was nothing to decorate with. I had one suitcase with my clothes and a photo of my sister folded into the back of my prayer book. That photo sat on the windowsill of my mind because in this room there were no windows, just cold air and the scent of detergent rising from the laundry room next door. I told myself this was temporary, that I was saving money, that someday I'd have a place with curtains. The door had no lock. Mr. Hargrove said it was for safety, but it only meant anyone could enter any time. And they did. Little Charlotte would wander in, asking for a story. Anne would storm in, demanding I find her shoes. Once, I found Mr. Hargrove standing at the threshold, just watching, holding a half-empty glass of scotch. He didn't say anything, just stared, swaying a little, then turned and walked away. That room became the shape of my silence. I learned to cry without making noise, to fold my sadness into neat little piles like I did their towels, to sweep my dignity under the rug with the dust. Because in their eyes, I was lucky. Lucky to be sheltered, lucky to be fed, lucky to be employed. And when I dared to look unhappy, Mrs. Hargrove would say, "You know, some people would kill for this opportunity." Opportunity. That word echoed in my head every night as I curled up under my thin blanket. Maybe they believed it. Maybe I even tried to believe it myself. But every creak of the ceiling above reminded me I wasn't a guest in this house. I was a ghost with chores. And the room under the stairs? That wasn't home. It was the place they put the things they didn't want to see. The rules were never written down, but they might as well have been carved into the walls. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't eat with the family. Don't use the upstairs bathroom. Don't close the kitchen door when you're inside. And above all, don't forget you're lucky to be here. Those were the rules. Not for them. Never for them. But for me. Mrs. Hargrove had a smile like frost. It looked polite from a distance, but it burned if you got too close. She would offer guests coffee and talk about charity while I scrubbed the kitchen floor behind her. If a guest asked about me, she'd say, "Oh, that's Maria. She's part of the family." But when the door closed behind them, it was always, "Maria, why didn't you polish the silver? Maria, this tablecloth is wrinkled. Maria, are you deaf?" I wasn't part of the family. I was the cautionary tale. The children were mirrors. They learned quickly that I was beneath them. Anne was 9 when she first rolled her eyes at me, 13 when she told her friends I used to live in a hut, 17 when she threw up on the stairs after a party and demanded I clean it while she laughed. I did. I always did. That's what the rules required. If I ever sat too long after lunch, Mr. Hargrove would clear his throat in a way that meant, "Get moving." If I ever asked for a break, Mrs. Hargrove would remind me that, back in the Philippines, people lived 10 to a shack. I'm not even from the Philippines. But that didn't matter. None of me did. There was a thermostat in the hallway, but I wasn't allowed to touch it. One winter, the boiler broke, and my room dropped to near freezing. I worked all day with numb fingers and slept in 2 coats. When I mentioned it, Mr. Hargrove chuckled and said, "That's what blankets are for." I didn't laugh. The rules shifted when it suited them. If one of their guests complimented the garden, suddenly I was the miracle worker. If the house wasn't spotless by morning, I was ungrateful. There was no winning, no gold star, just moving goalposts and a ledger of sins only they could see. But the worst rule was the one they never said out loud. You don't get to say no. I carried toddlers with a slipped disc. I worked through fevers. I missed weddings, funerals, birthdays. I held their secrets and swallowed their insults. I obeyed, not because I lacked a spine, but because I had nowhere else to go. And they knew that. They always knew. So I followed the rules, even as they broke me in ways I wouldn't understand until much later. Because that's the thing about invisible rules. They don't need to be shouted. They just need to be obeyed. And I obeyed, until the day I didn't. Charlotte was the only thing that made staying bearable. She was just a baby when I arrived, pink-cheeked, always fussy, born into a house too cold for such a warm little soul. I remember holding her that first night, while Mrs. Hargrove barked orders from the hallway. "Make sure she sleeps through," she snapped. Then she disappeared into her bedroom with a glass of wine, closing the door on her daughter and on me. Charlotte didn't sleep through. Not that night. Not for the first 3 years. But I held her anyway, hour after hour, whispering lullabies I barely remembered from my own childhood. I rocked her until my arms ached, paced the creaky floorboards with her tiny body pressed to my chest. She smelled like milk and lavender, and when she finally drifted off, her little fingers would cling to the collar of my shirt, as if even in sleep, she knew I was the only constant in her life. She became mine in every way except name. I changed her diapers, taught her to walk, to talk. Her first word wasn't mama, it was Maya, her version of my name. She'd waddle after me through the kitchen, babbling stories only we understood. I made her bottles, cut her grapes in quarters, sewed her stuffed bear when its leg tore off. On rainy afternoons, I'd sit with her by the window, tracing raindrops and pretending they were little people racing down glass towers. And in those moments, I almost forgot the rest of the house. The shouting, the slamming doors, the blame that always circled back to me. Charlotte was a world away from all of that. For a few years, she loved me like a child loves their mother, fully, unfiltered, without shame. But children grow, and this house didn't let love survive if it wasn't on their terms. When Charlotte was 6, she started correcting my English in front of her friends. When she was 8, she stopped hugging me unless we were alone. At 10, she asked me not to come near her school. "It's weird," she said. "People think you're my nanny." I didn't remind her that I was her nanny, or that I had been more mother to her than the woman who birthed her. I just nodded and stepped back. Because that's what you do when love is no longer welcome. You make yourself smaller. You let them forget. But I never forgot her. Not even when she stopped calling me Maya. Not even when she told someone at a party that she grew up with help. I didn't correct her. I just kept my eyes down and walked back to the kitchen. She didn't know what she took from me, but one day, she would. One day, they all would. It started with a sigh, a heavy, exaggerated sound that came from across the table as I set down the wrong spoon. Mrs. Hargrove didn't say anything at first. She just pushed her chair back with that slow, deliberate scrape that made my skin prickle. She stood, walked over, and picked up the spoon between 2 fingers like it was diseased. "How many times do I have to tell you?" she said, voice cold and sharp as broken glass. Then she dropped it into the sink like a punishment. That was the first time I felt it. Not physical pain, not yet, but something worse. That moment when you realize you're not seen as a person anymore, just a function, an error, a problem to be managed. They never hit me outright in the beginning. That would have been too crude for people like them. No, they preferred a different kind of violence, the kind that could wear pearls while delivering it. It came in the form of slammed doors, broken plates, shouted names, the silence after a mistake, the sudden cold shoulder that lasted for days. Mrs. Hargrove would pass me in the hallway like I was a ghost, then erupt over something small. A streak on the mirror, crumbs on the counter, a towel folded the wrong way. Once, she flung a hairbrush at my feet and screamed, "Do it again!" because she didn't like the way I arranged her vanity. Mr. Hargrove was worse when he drank. He wasn't home much, but when he was, his presence carried thunder. He'd throw his briefcase down and bark, "Why does it smell like onions in here?" Or he'd complain that the sheets weren't crisp enough, that the house didn't feel right. One night, after Charlotte spilled juice on the rug, he turned to me and snarled, "What the hell do I pay you for?" She cried. I got slapped. Just a quick backhand. Nothing dramatic. but enough to make my vision flash white and my ears ring. And then he walked away, muttering about how I needed to learn discipline. No one apologized. Ever. Not once in 27 years. The worst part wasn't the pain. It was how quickly I learned to hide it. To say, "Yes, sir," with a red cheek. To work a full day with a swollen wrist. To pretend nothing had happened, because if I acknowledged it, it would become real. And real meant unbearable. So I swallowed it, again and again. I told myself it wasn't a pattern, that maybe they were just stressed. Maybe I'd done something wrong. Maybe if I worked harder, tried harder, smiled more, it would stop. But abuse doesn't stop because you behave. It stops because you fight. And I hadn't learned how to fight. Not yet. I was hired to clean. That's what the ad said. Live-in housekeeper. Light cooking. Must be discreet. I remember circling it in red pen at the corner of a bus station with $3 left in my pocket. Cleaning? I could do. I'd grown up scrubbing floors and hanging laundry since I was tall enough to reach a clothesline. What I didn't know was how much I'd end up doing that no one ever planned to pay me for. They called it helping out. At first, it was just staying a little later with the kids while Mrs. Hargrove got her nails done. Then it became full days with the baby and school pickups for the older two. "You're already here," she'd say, slipping on heels and spraying perfume that lingered for hours after she left. Might as well. Then it was cooking dinner. Then it was managing deliveries, sorting laundry, arranging birthday parties. I learned how to trim hedges, treat a fever, steam silk without damaging it, and unclog a toilet at 2 a.m. in the dark. None of this was in the job description. None of it earned a penny more. When I asked about a raise after 5 years, Mrs. Hargrove blinked at me like I'd asked for her diamond necklace. "Maria," she said, "you live here rent-free. You eat our food. We trust you with our children. You really think you deserve more?" More. Like I was already getting something too generous. What they never saw, what they never wanted to see, was how much I gave. I missed weddings, funerals, birthdays. I stood through their fights and cleaned up after their reconciliations. I packed their suitcases, ironed their lives, and watched from the doorway while they laughed at dinner parties and forgot I existed. The Hargrove children never knew the cost of what they had. They never had to. I was always one step ahead. If they left their shoes in the hallway, I put them away. If they cried, I was there before their parents were. I was a constant shadow, and like any shadow, I was taken for granted. I wasn't on any health insurance. I didn't get sick leave. When I had the flu one winter and couldn't lift my head, I worked anyway. "It's just a little bug," Mrs. Hargrove said, handing me a grocery list. The truth is, I was doing the job of 3 people. Housekeeper, nanny, cook. Sometimes therapist, sometimes doormat. But I only had one title: help. They didn't see me as a woman. They didn't see me as human. They saw me as part of the furniture, a thing that made their lives easier. But I wasn't a thing. I just hadn't remembered that yet. The first slap didn't come from Mr. or Mrs. Hargrove. It came from Anne. She was 14, with braces, and the kind of arrogance that grows in children who've never been told no. I'd asked her to pick up her clothes from the bathroom floor. Just that. Nothing more. She was already running late for school, and I said, "Anne, please, your uniform's still on the floor. I'm not your servant." She turned, stared at me like I'd insulted her bloodline, and slapped me. Not a shove, not a playful hit. A full, open-palmed strike across my cheek. It wasn't the pain that stunned me. It was the silence that followed. Her breathing shallow, my cheek burning. We stood there in the tiled hallway, two women, one still a girl, the other too tired to flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scold her. I just walked away, hand pressed to my face, heart thudding in my ears. I thought, for a brief moment, that someone would notice, that maybe Anne would feel shame, that maybe Mrs. Hargrove, when I told her later that afternoon, would be horrified. But when I told her, she laughed. "Oh, Maria, teenagers are hormonal. You probably startled her." She was spreading jam on toast, didn't even look up. "You're a grown woman. Let it go." Let it go. That phrase would follow me for years. Let it go when they insulted me. Let it go when they took credit for my cooking at parties. Let it go when Mr. Hargrove slammed the door hard enough to rattle the picture frames, as if their every cruelty was something small enough to sweep into the corners. But I couldn't let it go. Not entirely. Anne didn't apologize. She didn't have to. That's what they were teaching her. That power meant never saying sorry. That some people could be hit, and others would be excused. The next morning, she asked me to iron her skirt without looking at me. I did it. Because that's what I did. I ironed their clothes, their tempers, their messy, careless lives. I smoothed everything they wrinkled. But something changed that day. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But a small crack opened in the wall I'd built around myself, and through it came something dangerous. Awareness. I realized then that if their daughter could raise a hand to me and feel no consequences, then this house was more than just unfair. It was unsafe. And if I didn't find a way out, that slap would be the first of many. There were always people in that house. Lawyers, doctors, friends from the country club. People with expensive cologne and louder voices. They came in laughing, left a mess, and never once said my name. I was the one who brought them drinks, passed hors d'oeuvres, and picked up the napkins they dropped without noticing. I was the one who stayed invisible. They called me her. Tell her the wine is too warm. Ask her if there are more crab cakes. Her had a name, but none of them cared to learn it. During dinners, I floated through the room like smoke, refilling glasses, clearing plates. I heard every story they told, every joke they thought was clever. I knew who was cheating, who was drinking too much, who was secretly broke. I carried more secrets on a tray than they did in their designer handbags. One Christmas Eve, I remember a woman in pearls leaned over and asked Mrs. Hargrove, "How do you find good help these days?" Mrs. Hargrove smiled, gestured toward me and said, "Luck, really." She just showed up one day and stayed. Just showed up. As if I hadn't given them my entire adult life. As if I hadn't held their children through fevers and tantrums, or scrubbed blood from white sheets when Anne got her first period and was too embarrassed to tell her mother. I was always there, but never seen. Weddings, birthdays, funerals. I worked them all. I served champagne at their daughter's sweet 16 and poured wine at Mr. Hargrove's father's wake. I carried platters while they danced, tidied bathrooms while they wept. I was background noise. Furniture. Necessary, but not worthy of attention. The children picked up on it too. Charlotte used to introduce me to her friends when she was small. "This is Maya. She helps take care of me." But by the time she was a teenager, she'd wave me away when guests were around. "Don't worry about her," she said once, her eyes flicking toward me like I was a smudge on the glass. "She's always here." And I was, always there, always in the background of their photographs, reflected in mirrors, blurred in corners, never invited, never acknowledged. Just once, I wanted someone to see me. Not as the maid, not as her, but as a woman with a life before this one, a story, a name, Maria. But to them, I wasn't Maria. I was the coffee that arrived without asking, the bed that made itself, the meal that appeared hot and on time. And if I disappeared, they'd notice the dust, not the absence. It was raining when the letter came, a thin white envelope, smudged at the corners, tucked beneath the stack of catalogues and bills I collected from the mailbox each morning. The return address was from home, San Miguel, my hometown. My chest tightened before I even opened it. Inside, written in my niece's careful handwriting, were just a few lines. Tia, I'm so sorry. Your mother passed in her sleep. We tried to reach you by phone, but the number didn't work. The funeral is Saturday. The words didn't register at first. I read them twice, 3 times. My hands started to tremble. I sat down on the back steps, the rain cold against my skirt, the letter crumpling in my lap. My mother. Gone. And I wasn't there. I'd left San Miguel when I was 17, said goodbye to her at the bus station, her hands clutching mine so tightly I thought she'd never let go. Make something of yourself, she said, but don't forget who you are. I hadn't forgotten. I just hadn't been allowed to remember. Inside, the house was warm, the dishwasher humming. Charlotte was watching cartoons. Mrs. Hargrove was on the phone planning a dinner party for the weekend. I walked into the kitchen, letter still in my hand, and asked for 3 days off. Just 3 days to fly home, say goodbye, and come back. Mrs. Hargrove didn't even turn around. Absolutely not, she said. We're hosting the Kellehers on Saturday. I need everything perfect. I stood there, stunned. My mother died, I said, barely able to get the words out. She finally turned. I'm sorry, Maria, but if you leave now, don't bother coming back. I can't be left high and dry over a funeral. Over a funeral. That night, I sat in the room under the stairs, the letter beside me, the suitcase still tucked under the bed. I didn't pack. I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling and listened to the sound of my own heartbeat. I didn't go. My mother was buried without me. I wasn't there to place flowers on her grave, or hold my sister's hand, or say the prayers she taught me as a child. All because I chose a paycheck over goodbye. Or maybe I didn't choose at all. Maybe the choice had already been made the moment I agreed to live in someone else's house, on someone else's terms. That was the day I began to understand the price of this life. Not just exhaustion, not just invisibility, but erasure of who I was, where I came from, and who I could have been if I'd ever been allowed to leave. Sundays were supposed to be my day off. That's what the Hargroves promised when they first hired me. You'll have Sundays to rest, Mrs. Hargrove said, adjusting her pearls like she was offering me a diamond. I remember nodding, grateful even for the illusion of freedom. But Sundays, like everything else in that house, came with conditions. At first, it was small things. Maria, could you just put on the roast before you head out? Or, Charlotte has ballet class. Could you please drop her off? Then it became, while you're out, can you pick up a few groceries? And by the time I realized what had happened, Sundays were no different than any other day. I never said no. Not because I couldn't, but because I knew what followed when I did. The cold stares, the passive-aggressive comments, the sudden forgetting of my paycheck, or the silent treatment stretched out for days. Saying no came with consequences I couldn't afford. So I worked, every Sunday, while they slept in. While they went to church in their pressed clothes and smiled at neighbours. I made their beds, scrubbed the bathroom tiles, prepared lunch for when they returned. The house was always spotless when they walked through the door, as if it had cleaned itself. The irony was bitter. The one day meant for rest, reflection, worship, was the day I felt most like a servant. Sometimes I'd sit on the back step for a few minutes with a cup of tea, just to feel the sunlight on my face, just to pretend the world was mine for a while. But even that would be interrupted. "Maria, where are you? We need towels." I'd go back inside, pour the rest of the tea down the sink, and fold towels like they were rosary beads, rituals done in silence, in sacrifice. I watched the years pass from behind curtains and through car windows. I saw neighbors decorate for holidays, walk dogs, kiss children goodbye. I saw couples holding hands on porches, old men watering plants. And I wondered if any of them ever noticed the woman in the Hargroves uniform, coming and going with heavy bags and heavier eyes. The worst part was how normal it all became. The way I stopped expecting rest, stopped yearning for it. It was easier to accept that I didn't deserve Sundays than to keep mourning them. But deep down, the resentment grew, quietly, like mold in the corners of my heart, spreading slowly, darkly, until the day came when I realized something. Rest isn't a luxury, it's a right. And I was done asking permission to breathe. It was Charlotte's 21st birthday party. They'd rented out the garden, strung fairy lights from tree to tree, and hired a string quartet that played through the sunset like a movie scene. The house was packed with her friends, all champagne flutes and summer dresses, the scent of roses thick in the air. I'd spent 3 days preparing, cooking, polishing, cleaning, until my knees were raw. But when the guests arrived, I disappeared, just like I always did. I moved through the shadows with trays of canapes and fresh napkins, watching from the sidelines like I wasn't the one who made the night happen. I didn't expect gratitude anymore, not even a nod. But I wasn't prepared for what she said. I was coming out of the kitchen, balancing a tray of glasses, when I heard Charlotte's voice. She was laughing with a group of her friends near the fountain, holding a flute of champagne and twirling it between her fingers like it meant nothing. "She's just the help," she said. "She's always been around. My parents practically imported her." Laughter. The kind that stings more than a slap. Just the help. I stopped in the walkway, my fingers tightening around the tray until the glasses trembled. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and didn't care. I stood there, frozen, listening to her talk about me like I was a stain on her memory. I had held her through fevers, taught her to read, sewn the hem on her prom dress. She had once, not so long ago, kissed me on the cheek and whispered that I was the only person who truly knew her. But in front of her friends, I was no one. That night, after the last guest left and the music faded, I went to my room under the stairs and locked the door. My knees ached, my feet were blistered, and my heart felt like it had cracked in half. I pulled out the box I kept hidden beneath the bed, the one with the letters, drawings, and little notes Charlotte used to leave me when she was small. One of them had stick figures drawn in crayon, a tall one with black hair holding hands with a little girl. "Me and Maya," it said in uneven letters. I stared at that drawing until my vision blurred. Somewhere between that crayon drawing and tonight's champagne toast, I had lost her. Or maybe I had just lost myself. For the first time in decades, I didn't cry. I felt something colder, quieter, resolve. Because when someone you love tells the world you're nothing, you have two choices: shrink into that silence or break out of it. I didn't know it yet, but that night marked the beginning of the end. and Charlotte's words would echo in my bones until the day I finally said no more. It was wedged between the pages of an old cookbook, one I hadn't opened in years. I was looking for a recipe Mrs. Hargrove had asked for, some lemon tart she remembered from Charlotte's childhood. The book was dusty, the spine cracked, and as I flipped through it, something fluttered to the floor. A small envelope, yellowed at the edges, my name scrawled on the front in messy, looping handwriting. Maya. That's what she used to call me before she learned better. Inside was a folded letter, written in crayon, dotted with hearts and crooked stars. Dear Maya, if I had two mummies, you would be the one I'd keep. You make me feel safe. I love your singing. You make better cookies than anyone. When I grow up, I will buy you a big house with a window and a pink room. Love, Charlotte. P.S. I'm sorry I threw the sock at your head yesterday. I sat on the floor, the letter shaking in my hands, my back pressed to the kitchen cabinet. I must have read it 20 times, mouthing the words like a prayer. My throat closed tight, the kind of tight that doesn't let sound escape. The kind that only comes when grief and rage meet in the middle of your chest. She had once loved me, with the pure, blinding love only a child can give. And now she couldn't say my name without shame. It hit me then, harder than any slap ever had. I'd given everything to this family, not just my time, not just my labor, my heart, my spirit, my life. And all I'd become was a convenient shadow, a fixture, the maid, the help. But I was never just the help. I was the woman who raised their daughter, who buried her own mother in silence, who missed every part of her own life so they could pretend theirs was seamless. I folded the letter carefully, hands trembling, and placed it back in the envelope. Then I stood up, slowly, and looked around the kitchen. The spotless counters, the polished floors, the empty plates, all of it built on my back, and I was done carrying it. That letter was the sign I didn't know I was waiting for. The proof that I wasn't crazy, or petty, or imagining things. Once I had mattered. Once I had been seen. And that version of me, the one Charlotte loved, was still in here, buried under decades of obedience. That night, I didn't finish the lemon tart. I didn't clean the floor. I sat in my room under the stairs with the letter in my lap, and I whispered, "No more." And for the first time in my life, I meant it. The vomit was still warm. It pooled at the base of the staircase. Cheap vodka, bile, and something pink from the cake Anne hadn't finished. She was 25 now, back from whatever job she'd already quit, and had thrown a party without asking. The house was trashed. Music still pulsed faintly from the living room speakers. Glasses tipped on their sides. A trail of red wine across the rug like a warning. I stood there in my robe, mop in hand, staring at the mess as Anne leaned against the banister, barefoot and swaying. "Well?" she slurred, waving a hand toward the floor. "Are you going to clean it? Or just stand there looking useless?" That word hit different now. Useless. I looked up at her. Hair tangled, eyeliner smudged, her face curled into the same spoiled expression I'd seen since she was 6, and I felt it. That stillness before a storm. Not rage, not sadness, something sharper, something final. "No," I said. She blinked, confused. "What?" "No," I repeated. "I'm not cleaning it." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard in that house. Anne stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then she laughed, ugly, high-pitched, forced. "Excuse me?" "I said no," I said, setting the mop down gently. "I'm not cleaning your mess. Not tonight. Not ever again." She didn't speak at first, just stood there, the weight of her entitlement pressing against the reality that her servant had just said no. Finally, she sneered. "You're lucky we even let you live here? You think anyone else would take you in?" "I'm not a stray dog," I said quietly. "I'm a person." That's when she stepped closer, her voice low and vicious. "Then leave. Pack your little bags and get out. See how far you get." "I already packed," I said. "2 days ago. I was just waiting for the right moment." Her mouth opened to say something else, but I didn't wait to hear it. I walked past her, my steps steady, my heart pounding like thunder against my ribs. Mrs. Hargrove was standing at the bottom of the stairs, robe cinched tight, lips pressed thin. She must have heard the whole thing. "What's going on here?" she demanded. "I quit," I said simply. "I'm done." She scoffed. "You'll be back." I turned, met her eyes, and said the only thing that mattered. "No, I won't." And I walked to my room under the stairs one last time. Picked up the bag I'd packed with my few clothes, my old prayer book, and Charlotte's letter. I walked out the front door at 2:14 a.m. No one followed. No one stopped me. And for the first time in 30 years, the night air belonged to me. It was over. And it was only just beginning. The room had a window. That was the first thing I noticed. A real window, not a smudged basement vent or a borrowed square of light from the hallway. This one looked out onto a crooked alley where vines climbed brick walls and the sun slipped through in patches. It was small, maybe the size of a closet, but to me it felt like a cathedral. The landlord didn't ask questions. Cash deposit, first month's rent, and the key was mine. He pointed to the radiator and said it worked, most of the time. I nodded, thanked him, and closed the door behind me. Just me and the quiet. The mattress was thin, the sink was chipped, and the floor creaked in odd places, but it was mine. Every crack in the wall, every dust-covered corner. It all belonged to me. There was no one shouting from upstairs, no footsteps pounding down the hallway, no list of things I'd forgotten to do. I took a deep breath. The air tasted different, not cleaner, but freer. The first night, I sat on the edge of the bed with a cup of tea and just stared out the window. There was a laundry line strung between buildings. Someone had left a pair of socks flapping in the wind. I smiled. For once, I had nothing urgent to do. No one waiting for me to cook, scrub, apologize. I didn't know how to be still. But I was learning. I got a job at a laundromat 2 blocks away. It wasn't glamorous. My hands stayed cracked from soap and heat, but no one yelled. I folded clothes and chatted with a woman named Rosa, who played the radio too loud and danced when she thought no one was watching. On Sundays, real Sundays, ones I didn't have to earn, I'd go to the park and sit on a bench with a book. Sometimes I didn't even read, I just watched. Children chasing pigeons, old men playing chess, teenagers laughing over nothing, and me, sitting, breathing, existing. I started sleeping better. At first it felt wrong, waking up and not rushing to iron or mop or serve. My body didn't know what to do without panic. But slowly my heart stopped racing in the mornings. I hung Charlotte's letter on the wall beside the window. A reminder of the girl who once loved me, of the woman I once was, of the one I was still becoming. It wasn't a palace. It wasn't even comfortable yet. But every day in that tiny room, I felt something return, piece by piece. My name, my worth, my life. And no one, not the Hargroves, not Anne, not the years I lost, could take that from me again. The phone rang late, too late for good news. I was folding towels from the laundromat, the smell of warm cotton still clinging to my fingertips, when it buzzed once, twice, then stopped. No message. A minute later, it rang again. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. "Hello?" I said. Silence. Then a breath. "Maya?" My stomach dropped. No one had called me that in years. It's Charlotte." The voice was smaller than I remembered. Fragile. It trembled like a child's, not the woman who once called me just the help in a room full of people. I didn't know what to say. The silence stretched too long. I could hear her trying not to cry. "I found the letter," she said. "The one I wrote you, in the cookbook." I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what I said, for what I became. I don't even know when it happened. One day you were everything to me, and then—" Her voice cracked. "Then I forgot. I stayed quiet, not out of cruelty, but because I needed to feel this moment without rushing it. I thought about calling you 100 times," she continued. "But I was scared. I didn't know if you'd pick up. I didn't know if I deserved for you to." "You don't," I said gently, but I answered anyway. More silence. Then a sniffle. "I miss you," she said. "I miss your stories, your songs, the way you used to make me feel safe." A long pause followed. Then she asked the one question I never expected to hear. "Can I see you?" I looked out the window. The sky was turning blue at the edges. Morning was coming. I thought about the years I'd spent waiting for someone to remember I existed, to say my name without shame, to speak to me like a person, not a possession. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm still healing, Charlotte, and you were part of what broke me." "I know," she whispered, "but I want to try. I want to be better. For you." I didn't give her an answer that night. I told her I'd think about it. That was the truth. Healing doesn't come all at once. Forgiveness doesn't bloom just because someone says sorry. But something inside me shifted. She remembered, and that mattered. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my little room with the window, watching the sun rise over the alley. I held the phone in one hand and Charlotte's old letter in the other. For the first time in a long time, I felt something like peace. Maybe she couldn't undo what was done, but maybe she could finally see me. Not as the maid, not as the help, as Maya, as Maria, as someone who said no more, and meant it. I walk with my head high now, not because life suddenly got easy, but because I no longer live bent beneath someone else's weight. I am not the maid, not the nanny, not the punching bag. I am Maria Delgado, and I am finally free. Some days, I still wake before sunrise, as if I'm expected somewhere. My body remembers the decades before my soul caught up. But now, I wake to silence, not someone shouting my name. I wake to coffee I make for myself, in a kitchen that belongs to me. The light spills through my window, warming the floor, and I let it touch me. I let it remind me I survived. I never went back. Not once. They sent letters, first from Mr. Hargrove, cold and curt, offering money to return for a brief transition period. Then from Mrs. Hargrove, longer, drenched in false warmth. "We miss you, dear. No one does things quite like you." I never replied. I let their silence stretch into absence until I became just another task they handed off to someone new. I don't pity her, whoever she is. But I hope she learns faster than I did. Charlotte called again. Sometimes we speak, carefully, like two people feeling along the walls of a collapsed house, looking for something salvageable. I don't know if I can forgive her, but I know she's trying, and sometimes that's enough. I use my time now helping other women like me, immigrants, caretakers, domestic workers who were promised dignity and given dust. I sit with them in back rooms and courtrooms, helping them find their voices. I tell them, your pain is real, your silence is not your shame, and you are not alone. They always look surprised when I say that. Maybe because I look ordinary, small, unremarkable. But I carry the weight of what I lived like a badge. I wear my past not with pride, but with proof that I endured, that I escaped, that I matter. Sometimes I still get scared, not of them anymore, but of forgetting who I am now that I'm no longer what they made me. I keep the letter Charlotte wrote pinned to the corkboard above my small desk. Not because I need the memory, but because I need the reminder that I once meant something to someone, and that I still do. If you're hearing this, if you've ever felt like you're nothing more than the background to someone else's life, I want you to know. You're not invisible. You're not disposable. You are not what they call you. You are what you choose to become. And the day you say no more is the day your real life begins. Mine did, and I will never go back.